elderly woman received a junkyard shack as a joke. But her biggest dream was having a place to live. Mrs. Beatrice Henderson trembled when she heard the young men's laughter on the other side of the fence. Her 73 years of life had taught her to recognize when someone was mocking her, and the sound of that laughter had nothing friendly about it. The young men approached, carrying a crumpled piece of paper and a rusty key. The tallest one, who couldn't have been more than 20, waved at her with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Mrs. Beatrice, you won the lottery," the young man shouted, drawing more laughter from his companions. "What do you mean, young man?" she replied, adjusting the faded scarf that covered her grey hair. "Look here, you are now the proud owner of this mansion," he said, pointing to a wrecked structure that barely stayed standing. Beatrice looked at what the boys called a mansion. It was an old Econoline van without wheels, with broken windows and a partially collapsed roof. Pieces of plywood and dented sheets of tin completed the makeshift structure. Rust had taken over nearly all the bodywork, and dry weeds grew through the cracks. "Are you messing with me?" she asked, but her voice came out weaker than she intended. "Messing with you? Not at all." "Here's the donation paper," said the young man, holding out the document. "Mr. Frank from the salvage yard said you can have this beauty. He was tired of looking at this junk on his lot." The other young men laughed even louder. One of them made exaggerated gestures, as if cutting a grand opening ribbon. "There you go, ma'am, now you've got your own house," said another, clapping his hands mockingly. Beatrice took the key with trembling hands. The cold metal was corroded, but she still held it carefully, as if it were made of gold. Her eyes filled with tears, but they weren't tears of sadness. "Are you boys serious?" and she whispered. "As serious as life, ma'am," answered the tallest one. "Mr. Frank said if you don't want it, he's sending it to the dump, so take it or leave it." The young men laughed for a few more minutes, took pictures with their phones pointing at the ruined structure and at Beatrice holding the key. Then they left, leaving her alone in front of what, to them, was just a bad joke. But to Beatrice Henderson, that key represented something she hadn't had in over 2 years, the possibility of having a place to call her own. She slowly approached the wrecked van. The side door was bent, but it still opened with a loud creak. The smell of mold and dampness hit her immediately, mixed with the scent of old oil and rust. The floor was a mixture of corroded metal and loose boards that gave way under her feet. Even so, Beatrice went in. The tears she had held back for so long finally rolled down her wrinkled face. She sat on the uneven floor and leaned her back against the cold metal wall. For the first time in many months, she didn't have to worry about someone telling her to leave. It was hers. Truly hers. The story of how Beatrice had ended up there was long and painful. She had been married for 40 years to Silas, a hard-working man who had managed to buy a modest house in the Queens neighborhood of New York City. They had 3 children, Bridget, Julian, and Megan. Life wasn't easy, but it was decent. Silas had passed away 3 years earlier, a victim of a long illness. The house, which was in both their names, ended up being sold to pay the medical debts that had piled up during his treatment. Beatrice was left with only the sale documents and some clothes in an old suitcase. Bridget, the oldest daughter, had married a successful lawyer, Gregory Mitchell. She lived in a large apartment on the Upper East Side and had a teenage daughter, Chloe. When Beatrice lost her house, Bridget invited her to live with them. But she made it clear from the very first day that it was temporary. "Mum, you understand that our life is very hectic, right?" Bridget said one morning, 3 weeks after the move. "Gregory works a lot. Chloe is at that difficult teenage phase. Having you here is making everyone kind of tense. I barely leave that little room, dear. I try not to bother anyone." "I know, Mum, but it's just that—" "Look, we're thinking about a better solution for you. There are some really nice places for people your age, you know, with nurses, activities, people in your age group." Beatrice knew exactly what her daughter was suggesting. A nursing home. "I don't want to go anywhere, Bridget. I just need a small corner, even a studio apartment. I can look for some work to help with the expenses." "Mum, you're 73 years old. What kind of work?" Bridget sighed, impatient. "Look, I already talked to Gregory. We can help you with a monthly payment at a nice place. There's one in Yonkers that comes highly recommended." Beatrice felt her heart tighten. After a lifetime of taking care of her children, working as a laundress to supplement the family income, supporting the household when Silas was unemployed for 2 years, now she was seen as a problem to be solved. What if I find another place? Can you give me some time to find something? Bridget hesitated for a moment, but eventually agreed. All right, Mom, but it can't be just anything. You have to take care of yourself, right? We worry about you. Beatrice knew she had a deadline, and she also knew Bridget had already made up her mind about the nursing home. For 2 weeks she scoured the city looking for a place to live. The cheapest rents she found cost $800, far beyond her retirement of a minimum wage. The boarding houses she could afford were in deplorable conditions, overcrowded and dangerous. Julian, the middle son, lived in Chicago with his wife and 2 small children. When Beatrice called him, the conversation was brief and painful. Mom, you know how our situation is here. Sarah is unemployed and I'm making little at the shop. We barely get by. If we could help, we would, but we really can't. Megan, the youngest, had moved to Ohio after getting married and only talked to her mother on the phone every once in a while. When she found out about the situation, she only offered empty advice. Mom, you could try those government programs, you know, or go to social services. They must have some solution. But Beatrice had already tried all of that. The lines were enormous. The programs had complex requirements and endless waiting lists. For a 73-year-old woman, with no steady income besides her retirement and no one to help her navigate the bureaucracy, the doors kept closing one after another. And so it was that, on the morning she would complete exactly 1 month in her daughter's house, Bridget announced her decision. Mom, we already signed you up at the assisted living facility. It's a really nice place. You'll like it. It has a garden, a TV room, people your age to talk to. Bridget, I'm begging you, give me a little more time. I promise I'll find something. Mom, you've had enough time. We can't wait any longer. Gregory is stressed at work. Chloe's grades are dropping at school. This house needs to get back to normal. Gregory, who was having coffee and reading the newspaper, didn't even look up from the paper when he said, Mrs. Beatrice, with all due respect, but you understand our situation, right? We have our own life, our own commitments. Beatrice looked at her son-in-law, a well-dressed man, with his hair always combed, who drove a brand-new car and complained when the air conditioning took too long to cool down. To him, she was nothing more than a nuisance, a problem that needed to be removed from his organized life. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, go ahead and leave a like and, most importantly, subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. All right, said Beatrice, getting up from the table. I'll go pack my things. Bridget seemed relieved, but tried to smooth things over. Mom, you'll see that it's going to be good. The social worker said you'll have your own bed, 3 meals a day, and your medication on time. It's much better than worrying about rent, electricity bills, all those things. Beatrice didn't answer. She went to the small room where she had spent that month and began putting her few clothes into the same suitcase she had arrived with. As she folded a blouse that Silas had given her as a gift years ago, she heard her granddaughter's voice in the hallway. Mom, why is Grandma crying? Asked Chloe. She's not crying, sweetheart. She's just organizing her things. But where is she going? There was a long pause before Bridget answered. To a place where she'll be better taken care of. Chloe, who was 15, wasn't as naive as her mother thought. You're sending her to a nursing home? That's not exactly it, Chloe. It's more like a residence for people her age. Mom, that's a nursing home. You're sending Grandma to a nursing home. Chloe's voice had a tone of protest that Beatrice hadn't expected to hear. The girl had grown a lot during that month and rarely talked to her, always busy with her phone, her friends, and her studies. Chloe, you're too young to understand these things. We're doing what's best for your grandmother. The best thing would be to let her stay here. It's not that simple. Beatrice finished packing her suitcase and slowly zipped it closed. She knew the sound of the argument in the hallway well. It was the same kind of conversation she had had with her own parents decades ago, when they had become too old to take care of themselves. Back then, she and Silas had taken them in without hesitation, making room in the living room so they could be comfortable. But times were different, families were different. She picked up her suitcase and left the room, Bridget was in the hallway, looking uncomfortable about the argument with her daughter. "Mum, you don't have to go today. It can be tomorrow or the day after tomorrow." "No, dear, better to go now, less suffering for everyone." Gregory appeared in the hallway, holding the car keys. "I'll take you, Mrs. Beatrice. The place is in Yonkers, not far." The drive to the assisted living facility was silent. Beatrice looked out the window at the houses, the buildings, the people on the street living their normal lives. She thought about how many other women her age might be going through the same situation at that exact moment. The assisted living facility was a low building, painted light yellow with barred windows and a small garden at the entrance. There was nothing wrong with the place, technically speaking. It was clean, organized, with uniformed staff and a strong smell of disinfectant. "You're going to like it here, Mrs. Beatrice," said the social worker who received them. "We have activities every day, a television in the common room, and 3 balanced meals. You'll be sharing a room with Mrs. Margaret, who is a very nice person." Beatrice nodded, but she couldn't get the word Chloe had used out of her mind. Nursing home. No matter how much they tried to sugarcoat it, that's exactly what it was. A place where families left their elderly when they became inconvenient. Mrs. Margaret really was nice. She was 80 years old, had lost her husband 5 years ago, and had been there for 3 years. "The family comes to visit at first," she said, while helping Beatrice organize her clothes in the closet. "Then the visits start getting further and further apart. It's normal, you know. Life out there is hectic, everyone has their own problems. And did you get used to it?" "We get used to what we have no choice but to accept, dear. But I won't lie to you, the first week is hard. You keep thinking about how you ended up here." During her first few days at the assisted living facility, Beatrice tried to adapt to the routine. Breakfast at 7, lunch at noon, dinner at 6. 2 hours of television in the common room, 1 hour of activities that basically consisted of card games and crossword puzzles. The staff were polite, but they treated all the residents as if they were big children. They spoke slowly, used diminutives excessively, and always assumed the elderly couldn't understand anything complex. "Mrs. Beatrice, time for your little medicine," the nurse would say every afternoon, even though she knew Beatrice didn't take any regular medication. "I don't take any medication at all." "Oh, that's right. But if you ever feel a little ache, we have a little pill for headaches." At the end of the first week, Beatrice received a visit from Bridget and Chloe. "How are you feeling, Mom?" "I'm fine," Beatrice lied. "The place is nice, isn't it? And have you made friends with the other people?" "Yes, everyone is very polite." Chloe stayed quiet for almost the entire visit, watching everything around her with a serious expression. She only spoke when her mother stepped out to talk to the social worker. "Grandma, are you really okay here?" Beatrice looked into her granddaughter's eyes. She saw genuine concern there, the kind she hadn't found anywhere in the past few weeks. "Chloe, Grandma is where she needs to be. That's not the same thing as being okay." The girl was right, but what could Beatrice say? That she woke up every morning feeling like she was in a strange dream? That she listened to the other residents talk about children who promised to come back the following week and never showed up? That she felt like an old piece of furniture stored away in a warehouse? "Grandma, if you want to leave this place, I can help." "What do you mean, sweetheart?" "I have money saved up. From my birthday, from Christmas, from when I helped my dad at the office. I can help you rent a small place." Beatrice felt her eyes well up. Her granddaughter's generosity touched her deeply, but she knew the solution wasn't that simple. "Dear, money isn't the only problem. Grandma would need an income every month and also someone to help if I got sick or needed something." "I could help with that too." "Chloe, you're 15 years old. You need to worry about your studies, about your life. You can't carry Grandma's burden on your shoulders." When Bridget came back, she brought news that left Beatrice even more disheartened. "Mum, we're going to have to change the visiting schedule. Gregory got a promotion at work, but he's going to have to travel more. And Chloe is struggling at school. She needs tutoring. We'll try to come at least once a month." Once a month. Beatrice nodded, but felt something die inside her. She knew how these things worked. Once a month would become every 2 months, then only on major holidays, then on special occasions, until eventually she would become just an uncomfortable memory that surfaced now and then in her daughter's conscience. In her second week at the assisted living facility, Beatrice met Mrs. Dorothy, a 78-year-old woman who had been there for 4 years. "You know what the problem with this place is, dear," said Dorothy while knitting a pink scarf. "It's not that it's bad. It's that here, we're just waiting." "Waiting for what?" "Waiting for nothing. That's the thing. We wake up, have breakfast, have lunch, have dinner, sleep, and the next day we do it all over again. There's no purpose, no goal. It's as if our lives were already over, but our bodies just haven't figured it out yet." Dorothy's words echoed in Beatrice's mind for days. It was exactly what she felt, as if she were living a ghost version of her own life, where every day was the same and nothing she did really mattered. Then came the incident that changed everything. On a Friday morning, Beatrice woke up with a sharp pain in her chest. It wasn't a heart attack pain. She knew how to tell the difference. It was a pain of anguish, of suffocation, of someone dying inside. She got up before breakfast and went out to the small garden. It was a cold July morning, and the sky was as grey as her mood. She sat on a concrete bench and watched the cars passing on the street beyond the fence. "Mrs. Beatrice," a voice called from behind her. It was Caleb, a young employee who worked in maintenance at the assisted living facility. He had always been kinder than the other staff, treating the residents like normal people instead of overgrown children. "Are you all right? It's too early to be out here." "I just couldn't stay inside, dear." Caleb sat down beside her on the bench. It was against the rules, but no one was watching. "Can I ask you something? Do you like being here?" Beatrice looked at him, surprised by the frankness of the question. "Why are you asking?" "Because I've worked here for 2 years, and I've seen a lot of people come through. You have a different look about you, like you still have a lot to do out there." "Caleb, I'm 73 years old. What could I possibly still have to do?" "I don't know, Mrs. Beatrice, but you seem like someone who still has dreams. Most people who come here have already given up on everything. Not you." Beatrice was silent for a few minutes. Caleb didn't push her to answer. "I had a dream," she said finally, "a very simple dream. I wanted to have a little place of my own, no matter how small. A place where I could wake up in the morning without having to ask anyone's permission. And why do you think you can't make that dream happen anymore? Look at me, dear. 73 years old, no money, no one. How is someone like that supposed to get a home? Mrs. Beatrice, I don't know the answer to that, but I know you're one of the smartest, hardest working people I've ever met here. If anyone can figure it out, it's you." The conversation with Caleb planted a seed in Beatrice's mind. For the rest of the day, she kept thinking about his words. Was it really possible to try starting over at 73? That night, she talked to Mrs. Margaret about it. "Margaret, have you ever thought about leaving this place?" "Every day, dear, but leaving to go where? My children made it very clear they don't have room for me in their lives." "But what if we could find a place of our own? The two of us together?" Margaret stopped brushing her hair and looked at Beatrice with interest. "What do you mean?" 2 retirement pensions together would be enough to rent something simple. We could split the expenses." "Beatrice, are you serious?" "I'm thinking about it. We could look for a small studio apartment, split the rent, the bills. At least it would be ours." Margaret was silent for a long time. "You know what? It's been 3 years since I made a decision about my own life. There's always someone deciding for me. What time I eat, what clothes I wear, what shows I watch on TV. I think I've forgotten what it's like to have a choice. So would you do it? If we can find a place that fits our budget, then yes, I'll do it." The 2 women began planning in secret. During the day, they pretended to be settled into the routine of the assisted living facility, but at night they talked quietly about the possibility of starting over. Margaret had more experience dealing with paperwork. She had been a public servant for 30 years before retiring, and she knew how to research information and handle documents. "We need to do this right," she said. "We can't go on emotion alone. We have to research prices, check the paperwork, calculate all the expenses." For a week they collected newspapers with rental ads, did the math on scraps of paper, and discussed every detail of the plan. The problem was that even combining both their pensions, the margin was very tight. "Beatrice, The numbers just don't work, Margaret said one night. Even the cheapest places we found would eat up almost our entire income on rent alone. There's very little left for food, electricity, water. But we could try to find some extra work, Beatrice suggested. I know how to sew, embroider. You cook very well. At 78, dear, who's going to hire two old women like us? It was a cruel reality, but undeniable. The job market had no place for people their age, even for simple work. That was when Caleb reappeared in Beatrice's life. One morning he came looking for her during garden hours. Mrs. Beatrice, I've been thinking about what you told me the other day, about having a place of your own. Yes, son? I have an acquaintance who works at a salvage yard. Frank. He has some vacant lots where he keeps scrap, old cars, things like that. The other day I was there and saw an old van he was about to send to the dump. Oh? I thought maybe it could become temporary housing. It's nothing fancy, of course, but it would be a roof over your head, and Frank's a good guy. Maybe he'd let you stay for a symbolic rent. Beatrice felt her heart race. The proposal was almost absurd, but it also represented a real possibility. Could you take me to talk to this Frank? Sure I can, but are you sure? It's not a comfortable place, you know. It's very different from here. Caleb, anywhere I can make my own decisions is already better than here. Caleb arranged to meet her the following Saturday during visiting hours. Beatrice told Margaret she had received an invitation to visit an acquaintance, which technically wasn't a lie. Frank's salvage yard was in an industrial area of Yonkers, between an auto repair shop and a building materials depot. It was a large lot surrounded by high walls, full of disassembled cars, metal parts, and every kind of scrap imaginable. Frank was a man around 50, with hands permanently stained with grease and a direct way of speaking. Caleb said, "You're looking for a place to live?" he asked, looking Beatrice up and down. Yes, Mr. Frank. Something simple. That fits my budget. Look, ma'am, I've got an old van in the back I was going to throw out anyway. If you want to take a look, we can talk. They walked among the piles of scrap until they reached the van Frank had mentioned. It was a blue 80s Econoline without wheels, with the body dented in several places and broken windows. Someone had improvised an extension with zinc sheets and plywood, creating an additional space next to the original structure. It's nothing pretty, Frank said, but it has a roof, room for a bed, some shelves. If you know how to fix it up, it could even become livable. Beatrice stepped into the improvised structure. The smell of moisture and rust was strong, and there were leaks in several spots on the roof. The floor was uneven, mixing the van's original metal with loose boards and pieces of plywood. But it was a space that could be hers. How much would the rent be, Mr. Frank? Look, ma'am, I'm not going to charge rent to a lady your age, but you'd have to keep an eye on security around the lot at night, just to discourage any kids who might try to break in and steal scrap. Would you be up for it? It was better than Beatrice could have imagined, a place to live in exchange for merely being a presence on the lot during the night. Yes, I accept. Then we can make a deal. You can bring your things whenever you want. You just can't make a fire inside because of the risk, and if you decide to leave, just let me know. On the way back to the assisted living facility, Beatrice could barely contain her excitement. She finally had a concrete alternative to get out of that place. When she told Margaret about the proposal, her friend's reaction was less enthusiastic than she had expected. Beatrice, are you thinking straight? An old van in the middle of a salvage yard. What if you get sick? What if it's dangerous? Margaret, it might really be dangerous. But staying here is dangerous too. We're dying little by little, a little more every day. But there you'll be completely alone. And here I'm surrounded by people, but completely alone too. What's the difference? Margaret was pensive for a long time. Beatrice, I admire your courage, but I think I'm too old for that kind of adventure. If you do go, I'll miss you a lot, but I'd rather stay. Beatrice understood her friend's decision. Everyone had their own tolerance limit for new beginnings, and there was nothing wrong with choosing safety over freedom. The following Monday, she told the social worker at the assisted living facility about her decision. Are you serious, Mrs. Beatrice? You want to leave a safe, well-organized place to live in a scrap heap? Yes, I do. But have you talked to your daughter about this? I'll talk to her. Mrs. Beatrice, with all due respect, you're 73 years old. That's no longer an age for this kind of adventure. What if something happens to you? What if you get hurt? Young lady, I'm going to die one day. Everyone will. The difference is that I'd rather die trying to live my way than die in here, waiting for life to pass me by. The conversation with Bridget was even harder. Beatrice called her daughter and asked to meet in person to talk about something important. Bridget arrived at the assisted living facility the following Saturday with Chloe. The two seemed worried. What is it, Mom? The social worker said you want to leave here? Yes, I do, sweetheart. But to go where? Do you want to come back to our house? No, I found a place for myself, a place of my own. Beatrice explained the situation with the van at the salvage yard. The reactions were exactly what she had expected. Mom, this is madness, Bridget burst out. You want to leave a decent place to go live in a scrap heap in the middle of a salvage yard? That's right, sweetheart. Mom, you're not thinking straight. What if you get robbed? What if you get sick? What if the van falls on you? Bridget, I've been through worse things in life. I raised 3 children practically on my own when your father lost his job. I took care of my parents when they got sick. I worked in people's homes since I was 12 years old. Do you really think I can't manage with an old van? But Mom, this is different. You're old. I'm old, but I'm not dead. Chloe, who had remained silent during the argument, finally spoke. Grandma, are you sure this is what you want? Yes, I'm sure, sweetheart. Then I think you should do what you feel is right. Bridget looked at her daughter with indignation. Chloe, you can't encourage your grandmother in this madness. Mom, Grandma is an adult. She has the right to choose how she wants to live. She's 73 years old. So what? That doesn't mean she lost the right to make decisions about her own life. The argument went on for over an hour, but Beatrice was determined. In the end, Bridget left furious, saying she was washing her hands of it if anything happened to her mother. Chloe stayed a few minutes longer. Grandma, I don't know if you're making the right choice, but I know you're making your own choice, and I respect that. Thank you, dear. If you need anything, you can call me. I'll find a way to help. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, go ahead and leave a like and, above all, subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. The following Monday, Beatrice packed her few belongings into the same suitcase she had arrived with at the assisted living facility. Mrs. Margaret helped her, crying softly. You'll be greatly missed, dear. You will too, Margaret, but we can see each other whenever we want. Promise you'll call me if you need anything. I promise. Caleb showed up at the agreed time to take her to the salvage yard. Several residents and staff members gathered in the entrance hall to say goodbye. It was rare to see someone leave that place of their own free will, and Beatrice's attitude had caused quite a stir among the other elderly residents. Good luck, Mrs. Beatrice, said Dorothy. You're doing what all of us wish we had the courage to do. The trip to the salvage yard took about 20 minutes. Along the way, Beatrice felt a mix of nervousness and excitement. She was taking a step into the unknown, but she was finally making a decision on her own. Frank greeted her with the same warmth as her previous visit. You brought your things? Great. Let me show you where the water faucet is and where the electrical hookup is. It's not much, but it works. The van was exactly as she remembered it. Old, battered, full of leaks, and smelling of dampness. But now it was officially hers. Beatrice set her suitcase on the uneven floor and looked around. Where to begin? The first step was to give it a thorough cleaning. Frank lent her a broom and some rags, and she spent the rest of the day clearing out the accumulated junk, sweeping up debris, and removing cobwebs from the corners. It was heavy physical work for a 73-year-old woman, but Beatrice felt more energized than she had in months. Every move she made was her own choice. Every decision about where to put things was made by her. By the end of the first day, the van was still far from livable, but it no longer looked like a garbage dump. Beatrice improvised a bed with some pieces of cardboard she found around the yard and lay down to sleep. The silence was different from the assisted living facility. There were always sounds of people coughing, shifting in bed, or staff members walking through the hallways. Here, she only heard the distant sounds of the city. Cars passing on the nearby avenue, a dog barking somewhere, the wind rattling the loose sheets of metal. It was a silence that didn't bother her. It was the silence of freedom. On the second day, she began to organize the interior space better. She used old crates she found around the salvage yard to create makeshift shelves. She arranged her clothes in neat piles. She improvised a place to store the few utensils she had managed to borrow from Frank. It was during this organizing that she made an interesting discovery. While removing one of the plywood panels that made up the van's extension, she found a small compartment that had been used as a glove compartment when the vehicle still ran. Inside the compartment, there were some old papers that appeared to be documents from the original vehicle. But there was also something more interesting, a small notebook with sewing and embroidery patterns. Beatrice flipped through the notebook curiously. Someone had used that van as a sewing workshop at some point in the past. There were diagrams of embroidery stitches, instructions for making different types of hems, and even some simple clothing patterns. This awakened a long-forgotten memory. Before getting married, she had worked in a small sewing workshop in downtown New York City. She had a skill with the needle and had dreamed of having her own workshop one day. Life had taken her down other paths, but the skill was still there, stored in her experienced hands. On the third day, Frank showed up to see how she was settling in. "How is it going, Mrs. Beatrice?" "It's good, Mr. Frank. Thank you for the opportunity. You're working miracles in this Econoline. It's even starting to look nice." Frank observed the improvements she had made and seemed impressed. "Mrs. Beatrice, may I ask you something? Do you know how to sew?" "Yes, I do. I worked with that when I was young. It's just that I have some old sheets here in the storage area. They're from a hotel that closed down. The owner brought everything over to be discarded. Some are torn, others are just stained. If you could fix up some of them, I could sell them and we'd split the profit." It was exactly the opportunity Beatrice needed to start earning some extra money. "Of course I can try, Mr. Frank." "Great. I'll go grab the sheets and an old sewing machine I have stored away. I don't know if it works, but we can try." The sewing machine was an antique Stitchmaster, probably from the 60s. It was rusty and needed some adjustments, but the motor still ran. Beatrice spent the rest of the day cleaning and oiling the machine. It was work that required patience and technical know-how, but she had learned those skills decades ago. When she finally got the machine running properly, she felt a deep sense of satisfaction. It was like rediscovering a part of herself that had been forgotten for a long time. The sheets Frank brought were truly in bad shape. Some had large tears, others were stained with yellow blotches that would never come out. But there were also a few pieces that could be saved with a little creativity. Beatrice began sorting the sheets into 3 groups: the unsalvageable ones, the ones that could be repaired with small fixes, and the ones that could be turned into other things. From the first group, she used the fabric that was still in good condition to make patches for the others. From the second group, she managed to recover several pieces that came out almost as good as new. And from the third group, she had the idea of making pillows, loose pillowcases, and even some aprons. The work took an entire week, but in the end, she had turned a pile of disposable sheets into sellable products. Frank was impressed with the result. "Mrs. Beatrice, you worked a miracle on those sheets. These will sell fast at the Central Market." "You really think so, Mr. Frank?" "I'm sure of it. And look, if this works out, I can get more material for you to work with. I have other contacts who discard fabric." It was the start of a small partnership. Frank would provide the discarded materials and handle the selling side, and Beatrice would turn everything into sellable products. The first sale at the Central Market went better than they expected. The repaired sheets sold quickly, and the pillows made from scraps were a big hit. "People like handmade things," Frank explained, "and you have a good touch for this kind of work." With the money from the first sale, Beatrice bought some basic supplies: thread, needles, a new pair of scissors, and a few yards of cheap fabric to make products from scratch. The Econoline was turning into a little sewing workshop. During the day, she worked at the machine, creating new pieces or repairing materials Frank brought. At night, she did hand embroidery, listening to the radio and feeling productive again. But life at the salvage yard wasn't just work. There were also practical challenges she had to learn to face. The first big problem was the rain. During the first heavy storm, Beatrice discovered that the van's leaks were much worse than she had imagined. Water came in from every side, soaking her clothes and threatening to damage her sewing machine. She spent the whole night trying to protect her belongings with plastic tarps and makeshift buckets. The next morning, she was exhausted and worried. That was when she met Wallace, the neighbor from the salvage yard. Wallace owned the mechanic shop next to Frank's lot. A man around 60 years old, a widower, who lived alone in the back of his shop. He had been watching Beatrice during the first few weeks, curious about the presence of the elderly woman at the salvage yard. "Mum, did you stay up all night because of the rain?" he asked, appearing at the fence that separated the two lots. "Yes, I did, Mr. Wallace. Water came in from everywhere. I can help with that. I have some materials here that can be used to seal those leaks." Wallace brought some aluminum sheets, screws, and a drill. He spent the entire morning helping Beatrice seal the spots where water was getting in. "It won't be perfect," he said, "but it will be much better. Thank you so much, Mr. Wallace. How can I repay you?" "You don't need to repay me anything. Folks who live around here have to help each other." From that day on, Wallace became a constant presence in Beatrice's life. He showed up regularly to check on her, always finding small repairs to make or improvements to suggest. "Mrs. Beatrice, you can't keep cooking on that flimsy little hot plate," he said one afternoon. "It's dangerous, and besides, you use up too much gas." "But I have no way to buy a stove, Mr. Wallace." "You don't need to buy one. I have an old stove here at the shop that a customer left as payment for a repair. It's not worth anything commercially, but it works well. I can install it for you." These small improvements kept adding up over the weeks. A better stove, sturdier shelves, better electrical lighting, a makeshift system for heating bath water. The van was turning into a functional home, not just a temporary shelter. Beatrice also began to establish her own routine. She woke up early, had a simple breakfast, worked on sewing during the morning, ate something quick for lunch, kept working in the afternoon, and reserved the first hours of the evening for more delicate embroidery. It was a routine she had created herself, based on her own needs and preferences. There was no one telling her when she should eat, what clothes she should wear, or what activity she should do. For the first time in months, she felt like the owner of her own life again. But not everything was peaceful. There were also problems she needed to learn to solve on her own. The first one came up on a Saturday night, when a group of teenagers tried to get into the salvage yard to steal car parts. Beatrice heard strange noises around midnight and got out of the van to investigate. She saw 3 young men climbing the fence at the back of the lot. "Hey, who's there?" she shouted, more out of reflex than courage. The young men saw her and hesitated for a moment. Beatrice figured they would run away immediately, but one of them got down from the fence and walked toward her. "Relax, Grandma. We just want to take a look at the parts. We're not going to mess with you." "You can't be here. This lot is private property." "And what are you going to do about it? Call the police?" Beatrice realized she was in a delicate situation. She didn't have a cell phone and there was no one nearby to help her, but she also knew that her presence there had exactly the purpose of discouraging this kind of trespassing. "Look here, kids," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "I know you're not bad people. You probably need money, you're out of work, without opportunities. I understand that." The young people seemed surprised by the tone of the conversation. "But this material here is Mr. Frank's livelihood. He's not rich, he works hard to earn his money. If you take these parts, you're not robbing a millionaire businessman. You're robbing a worker just like yourselves." The young man who had climbed down from the fence was silent for a moment. "And besides," Beatrice continued, "if you take anything and Mr. Frank finds out, he'll end the arrangement we have. And then a 73-year-old woman will be left with nowhere to live. You live here yourself, Grandma?" "I do, in that van over there." The 3 young people looked at the makeshift structure where Beatrice lived. "Really? Really? And if you hurt me, you'll be hurting someone who's in the same tough situation as you." The group's leader made a gesture to the other 2 who were still on the fence. "Forget it, let's go." "Thank you," said Beatrice. "Grandma, aren't you afraid to live here alone?" "I am. Everyone's afraid of something, but the fear of loneliness is smaller than the fear of not being in charge of my own life. The young people left, and Beatrice went back to the van. Her hands were trembling a little, but she felt satisfied with the way she had handled the situation. The next morning she told Frank what had happened. "You did the right thing, Mrs. Beatrice, but now I'm worried. What if they come back with more people?" "We'll deal with that when it happens. Look, I have an idea. How about we get a dog to keep you company? A big dog, one that barks a lot when strangers are around." Beatrice liked the idea. She had always liked animals, and a dog would be both protection and company. Frank knew someone who was giving away a big mutt, a German shepherd mixed with other breeds that had gotten too big for the owner's apartment. "His name is Buster," said the young man who brought the dog. "He's very gentle, but he barks loud when strangers are around. You just need to be patient with him because he's used to living indoors." Buster was indeed a big dog, with dark fur and upright ears. At first, he was a little scared of the salvage yard environment, but he soon got used to Beatrice. "Look at that, Buster," she said, stroking the animal's head. "Now we're going to take care of each other." The dog quickly adapted to life at the salvage yard. During the day, he lay near the van while Beatrice worked on her sewing. At night, he slept across the doorway, serving as a natural alarm system. Buster's presence also caught the attention of other people in the neighborhood. Children from a nearby neighborhood started showing up to play with the dog and ended up staying to chat with Beatrice. "Ma'am, did you make this pillow?" asked a girl about 10 years old, watching the embroidery work Beatrice was doing. "I did, dear." "It's so pretty, can you teach me?" "I can, but you'd have to ask your parents' permission first." The girl's name was Lily, and she lived with her maternal grandmother, Mrs. Pearl, in a simple house 3 blocks from the salvage yard. When Pearl found out there was an elderly woman living alone in a van, she came personally to meet Beatrice. "I'm Pearl, Lily's grandmother," she said, a woman in her 60s, with a practical and direct manner. "Nice to meet you, Pearl. I'm Beatrice. Lily was charmed by your embroidery. She said you offered to teach her." "I did." The girl seems interested. "Beatrice, can I say something? Aren't you afraid to live here?" "I am, but it's a fear I chose. It's better than the fears other people choose for me." Pearl laughed at the answer. "I like you. Look, if you need anything, someone to talk to, a hot bath, a better meal, my house is right nearby. We women who live alone have to help each other." That conversation marked the beginning of an important friendship in Beatrice's life. Pearl was a strong woman who had raised her grandchildren on her own after her daughter left home very young. She worked as a cleaning helper in several houses in the area and knew everyone in the neighborhood. "Beatrice, you have a real talent for sewing," she said, after looking at some of the work Beatrice was doing. "There are a lot of people around here who could use sewing services, hemming pants, adjusting clothes, things like that. Do you think I could get clients?" "You sure could. The problem is people don't know you exist. You'd need to get the word out." Pearl offered to help with that. During her cleaning jobs in the area, she mentioned that a friend did sewing work for a fair price. It wasn't long before the first clients started showing up. Mrs. Susan was the first, a woman around 65 who needed to adjust a dress she had bought too big. "Pearl said you do sewing work," she said, a little hesitant when she saw the place where Beatrice worked. "I do, Mrs. Susan. Would you like me to take a look at the dress?" Beatrice examined the piece carefully. It was a simple dress, made of good fabric that needed to be taken in at the waist and shortened at the hem. "I can fix it up. It'll be ready in 2 days, and the price is $20. That was far below what Susan was used to paying other seamstresses, but Beatrice didn't intend to charge high prices. She just wanted to earn some extra income to improve her living conditions. When Susan came back to pick up the dress, she was impressed with the quality of the work. "Wow, it came out perfect. It came out. You're so meticulous." "Thank you, Mrs. Susan. You know I have other clothes that need adjusting. Can I bring them next week?" Starting with Susan, other clients began to appear. Word of mouth spreads fast in small neighborhoods, especially when the work is good and the price is fair. Soon Beatrice was getting 2 or 3 clients a week, in addition to the work she did with the materials Frank managed to get for her to refurbish. Financially, life was becoming more stable, but there were still emotional challenges to face. The main one was the distance from her family. Ever since she had left the assisted living facility, Beatrice hadn't heard from Bridget. She knew through Chloe, who called from time to time, that her daughter was still upset about her mother's decision. "Grandma, Mom keeps saying you're doing something crazy," Chloe told her during one of her calls. "She's afraid someone might hurt you." "And you, sweetheart, what do you think?" "I think you're happier now than you were at the nursing home. Your voice changed, Grandma. You seem more alive." "That's exactly how I feel, Chloe. More alive. Can I come visit you one of these days?" "Of course you can, sweetheart, but only if your mother allows it. Mom doesn't need to know everything." Chloe showed up at the salvage yard on a Saturday afternoon. She came by bus, then walked the 6 blocks from the stop to Frank's lot. When she saw the van where her grandmother was living, her reaction was one of surprise, but not horror like Beatrice had expected. "Grandma, you really made a home in here?" "I did. Do you want to come in and see?" Chloe looked at everything with the natural curiosity of a 15-year-old. She saw the sewing machine in working order, the organized shelves, the colorful curtains Beatrice had made from scraps, the little corner where her embroidery projects were kept. "It's cozy, Grandma. It really feels like a home." "It is a home, sweetheart. My home. And are you happy here?" "I am, Chloe. For the first time in a long while, I'm truly happy." Chloe's visit lasted the entire afternoon. She helped her grandmother with some simple embroidery, played with Buster, and talked with Frank and Wallace about how Beatrice was adjusting to life there. "Your grandmother is a warrior," Wallace said to Chloe. "She managed to turn a salvage yard into a real home." When it was time to leave, Chloe was visibly emotional. "Grandma, I'm so sorry I didn't understand before what you wanted." "What are you talking about, dear?" "When you were in that place, I could see you weren't doing well. But I thought it was normal that old people just got sad. Now I understand that you only wanted the right to live your own way." "Do you really understand that, Chloe?" "I do, and I'm going to talk to Mom about it." The conversation between Chloe and Bridget wasn't easy, but it planted a seed of doubt in the mother's mind. According to what Chloe told her over the phone, Bridget had been surprised to learn that Beatrice wasn't living in deplorable conditions as she had imagined. "Mom got curious when I told her about the sewing machine and the clients you've been serving," Chloe said. "I think she's starting to think that maybe you're not completely crazy." But reconciliation with Bridget was still far from happening. Her wounded pride and the difficulty of admitting she had misjudged her mother kept her at a distance. Meanwhile, Beatrice's life continued to evolve in ways she hadn't anticipated. The sewing business was growing. In addition to the individual clients who came in for small alterations, she was receiving larger orders. Pearl had secured a contract for her to make aprons for a small restaurant in the area. There were 20 aprons, all identical, which would bring in good money if she could get them done in 2 weeks. "Beatrice, are you going to be able to get all of that done on time?" Pearl asked. "On my own. It'll be hard, but I have an idea." Beatrice's idea was to teach Lily, Pearl's granddaughter, to help her with the simpler sewing. The girl had shown interest and skill during the lessons Beatrice had given, and she could be a valuable assistant. "Lily, would you be up for working with me on the aprons? I'd pay you a share of the money." "I would, Aunt Beatrice. Would it be like a real job?" "It would be a real job." The apron project became a very rewarding experience for the two of them. Beatrice handled the more difficult cuts and the finishing work, while Lily sewed the straight seams and did the simpler tasks. They finished the order ahead of schedule, and the aprons came out with excellent quality. The restaurant owner was so satisfied that he ordered 20 more aprons for when he opened his second location. "Beatrice, have you thought about making this business official?" Pearl suggested. "With the skill you have and the prices you charge, you could build a regular customer base." It was a tempting idea, but Beatrice knew that formalizing a business required paperwork, paying taxes, and a series of bureaucratic steps she wasn't sure she could handle. "Pearl, I don't even know where to begin with those things, and besides, I'd need a commercial address, a permit, all of that." "We can find out. There must be some program for individual micro-entrepreneurs, those government things." Pearl was younger and more familiar with bureaucracy. She offered to accompany Beatrice to the Small Business Administration office to find out what the options were. But before they could schedule that visit, something happened that completely changed the course of the story. On a Thursday morning, Beatrice woke up to the sound of raised voices outside the van. They were voices she didn't recognize, talking about something related to the salvage yard lot. She stepped out to see what was going on and found Frank talking to two men in suits and a woman holding a clipboard and a camera. The lot has been registered in the family's name since 1987, one of the men in suits was saying. I know that, Frank replied, visibly nervous. But we always had an arrangement with your father. There was never a problem. The problem is that my father passed away 3 months ago, and we're organizing the documentation for the properties he left behind. This lot is appraised at $500,000. We can't keep letting it be used as a salvage yard for a token fee. Beatrice felt her stomach drop. Were those men there to take Frank's lot away from him? Frank saw her approaching and gestured for her to stay where she was, but the men in suits had already noticed her presence. And that structure over there? One of them asked, pointing at Beatrice's van. Is someone living there? Yes, there is, Frank answered. That's Mrs. Beatrice. She looks after the lot during the night. That's irregular, said the woman with the clipboard. You can't have a residence in a storage area. We're going to have to include that in the report. Beatrice approached the group, trying to get a better sense of the situation. Excuse me, what's the problem? The taller man in the suit looked her up and down with a look of displeasure. Ma'am, do you live in that structure? Yes, I do. That's completely irregular, ma'am. A storage area can't be used for housing. But Mr. Frank gave me permission. Mr. Frank has no authorization to give permission for anything, the man interrupted. He's just a tenant with an expired contract. The situation was getting worse and worse. Beatrice looked at Frank, who shook his head sadly. Mrs. Beatrice, they're the children of the former owner of the lot. They want to terminate our agreement and sell the property. And how much time do we have? She asked. 30 days, replied the man in the suit, both for the removal of the scrap metal and for vacating the irregular housing structure. 30 days. Beatrice felt her legs tremble. After months of building a life in that place, she would have to start all over again from scratch. May I ask how much you'd want to keep the arrangement you had with your father? The siblings exchanged glances. Ma'am, even if we wanted to keep the salvage yard, which we don't, it would be a rent of $8,000 a month. The land is far too valuable to keep being used that way. $8,000 a month. An astronomical amount for Frank, who could barely afford the $400 he was paying before. After the siblings left, Beatrice and Frank stayed behind talking about the situation. Mr. Frank, is there anything we can do? Beatrice, I'm going to try talking to them, see if they'll lower the rent. But I doubt it. They want to sell the lot to a construction company as soon as possible. And what if they won't negotiate? Then I'm going to have to close the salvage yard, plain and simple, and you're going to have to find somewhere else to go. The news spread quickly among the people who knew Beatrice. Pearl showed up that same afternoon, worried. Beatrice, Lily told me what happened. Is it true you all have to leave this place? Looks that way, Pearl. And have you thought about where you'll go? That was the question Beatrice had been trying not to ask herself. Where would she go? Back to the assisted living facility? Try to impose her presence at Bridget's house again? Look for another place to live with the little money she had managed to save? I don't know yet, Pearl. I'm going to have to think it over carefully. Look, if nothing works out, you can stay at my place for a few days. It's not comfortable, but at least you won't be out on the street. Pearl's offer was generous, but Beatrice knew it wasn't a long-term solution. Her friend's house was too small to permanently accommodate another person. Wallace also showed up to offer help. Mrs. Beatrice, I have a room in the back of the workshop that's a bit messy, but you could stay there temporarily. They were sincere offers made by people who genuinely cared about her. But Beatrice didn't want to become a burden in the lives of the friends she had made. That night, she stayed up late, thinking about possibilities. Buster was lying next to her makeshift bed, as if he sensed she needed company. What do you think, Buster? Can we bounce back one more time? The dog looked at her with his intelligent eyes and wagged his tail, as if saying yes. The next day, Beatrice made a decision. She called Chloe from a public phone. "Chloe, I need to tell you something. They're going to have me leave the salvage yard." "What do you mean, Grandma?" Beatrice explained the whole situation. Chloe was visibly worried. "Grandma, do you want me to talk to Mum? Maybe now she'll understand that you need support from the family." "No, dear. I don't want your mother to take me back out of pity or obligation. I want her to accept me because she respects my choices." "So, what are you going to do?" "I'll figure it out. I always have." But for the first time since she had left the assisted living facility, Beatrice was truly scared. At 73 years old, facing another drastic change was much harder than she wanted to admit. That's when something unexpected happened. The next morning, while she was organizing her things and trying to calculate how much money she had saved up, an unfamiliar woman appeared at the salvage yard. She was a lady around 50 years old, well-dressed, driving a small but well-cared-for car. "Sorry to bother you, I'm looking for Mrs. Beatrice, the one who does sewing work." "That's me." "Great. I'm Vanessa, the owner of the beauty salon on the main avenue. Mrs. Susan recommended your services." Vanessa explained that she wanted to order uniforms for the employees at her salon. There were 5 dresses, all identical, in fabric she would provide herself. "The job would pay $300 and I'd need them by next week. Would you be able to do it?" It was a good amount, but Beatrice hesitated. "Mrs. Vanessa, I'll take the job, but I need to explain something. I'm going to have to move out of here in the next few weeks, so maybe it's better for you to find another seamstress." "Why? Is there a problem with the quality of your work?" "No. The problem is that the landowners want to sell. I'm going to have to find another place." Vanessa was thoughtful for a moment. "Beatrice, can I ask you a personal question? How much would you pay in rent for a suitable place to live and work?" "Mrs. Vanessa, with my income, at most $500. "And what if I knew of a place like that?" Beatrice felt a flicker of hope. "You really do?" "Yes, I do. I have a 2-story house on the street behind my salon. Upstairs is my home and downstairs has always been commercial. But the last tenant left 3 months ago, and I haven't been able to rent it out yet." "And would it be possible to live there?" "Yes, it would. It has a small living room, a little bathroom, and even a separate entrance. You could use it to live and work. The rent would be exactly $500. It was too good to be true." Beatrice suspected it might be a trick of fate. "Mrs. Vanessa, why are you making me this offer?" "Look, I'll be honest. First, because I need someone I can trust near the salon during the night. Second, because Mrs. Susan spoke very highly of your work, and who knows, we might be able to do other partnerships. And third, because I admire what you've done here." "What have I done here?" "You turned a pile of junk into a home. That shows you're someone who doesn't give up easily. I like people like that." Vanessa invited Beatrice to see the property that same day. It was truly perfect for her needs. A small but functional space, with good natural light, a sink, a bathroom, and enough room for the sewing machine and material storage. "You can move in whenever you want," said Vanessa. "And if it works out, we can even talk about you doing other services for the salon." Beatrice could hardly believe her luck. All of a sudden, her situation had gone from desperate to promising. "Mrs. Vanessa, I accept, but can I bring my dog?" "Of course you can. Even better, that way someone's looking after the place." The move happened the following week. Frank lent a small truck, and Wallace helped carry the things. The sewing machine, the makeshift shelves, the clothes, the work materials, everything Beatrice had built in the van was transferred to her new home. "Mrs. Beatrice, you're going to be greatly missed around here," said Frank as they carried the last box. "I'll miss you all too. But you're going to a much better place. You deserve this opportunity." The farewell was emotional. Pearl and Lily showed up to help with the move, and even some of the sewing clients came to say goodbye. "Auntie Beatrice, you're not going to forget to teach me embroidery, right?" asked Lily. "Of course not, dear. Now it's going to be even easier, because I'll have a more organized place to work." In the new space, Beatrice quickly got settled. The space was bigger and more functional than the van, and for the first time in a long time she had easy access to running water and her own bathroom. The partnership with Vanessa also proved very productive. In addition to the salon uniforms, she started doing other work, chair covers, curtains for the booths, and even some clothing alterations for the salon's clients. "Beatrice, the women keep asking where they can order sewing work," said Vanessa. "How about we make it an official partnership? I refer you to the clients, and you give me a small commission." It was exactly the kind of formal arrangement Beatrice needed. With Vanessa's recommendation and a proper place to work, she managed to build a solid clientele in just a few months. It was around that time that she received an unexpected phone call. "Mom," said the familiar voice on the other end of the line. It was Bridget, after nearly 6 months without speaking directly. "Bridget, how are you, sweetheart?" "I'm doing well, Mom. Chloe told me you moved again, to a better place from what she said." "That's true, sweetheart. I'm in a very good place now." There was a long pause in the conversation. "Mom, I wanted to apologize." "Apologize for what, Bridget?" "For not supporting you when you needed it. For thinking I knew what was best for you without asking what you wanted." Beatrice felt her eyes filling with tears. "Sweetheart, you did what you thought was right at the time." "No, Mom. I did what was most convenient for me. And that wasn't right." "Bridget." "Mom, can you give me your address? I'd really love to visit you, if you'll let me." "Of course I will, sweetheart. You're always welcome." Bridget's first visit to Beatrice's new place of work and home was tense, but emotional. She arrived accompanied by Chloe and Gregory, who seemed uncomfortable with the situation. "Mom, it's very organized here," said Bridget, observing the sewing machine, the fabrics neatly arranged on shelves, the works in progress. "Thank you, sweetheart." "You really managed to build a business?" "Yes, I did. It's nothing very big, but it supports me and makes me happy." Gregory, who had spent the whole visit in silence, finally spoke. "Mrs. Beatrice, I owe you an apology. I misjudged your ability to take care of yourself." "It's all right, Gregory. Everyone makes mistakes sometimes." "No, it's not all right. I treated you like a problem to be solved, when all you really wanted was respect." It was the first time Gregory had spoken to Beatrice in a genuinely respectful way, and it meant a great deal to her. Chloe was beaming as she watched the family reconcile. "Grandma, now you can come over for Sunday lunch. If you want to, of course." "Of course I want to, dear." From that day on, Beatrice had regular contact with her family again. She no longer lived with them, and she didn't want to, but she had the affection and respect she had always longed for. Bridget even brought some friends to see her mother's sewing services, bringing in new clients for Beatrice. "Mom, Heather needs alterations on the dress she's wearing to her daughter's wedding. Can I give her your address?" "Of course you can, dear. I'll be happy to help." Life was finally taking a shape Beatrice could call complete. She had her independence, her work, her home, her friends, and her family back, but there was still a surprise in store for her. One Saturday morning, while she was embroidering a tablecloth ordered by a client, a man about 70 years old appeared at the door of her workplace. He was a well-groomed man with white hair, wearing simple but clean clothes. "Mrs. Beatrice Henderson." "That's me. How can I help you?" "My name is Thomas Edward. I heard you do sewing work." "Yes, I do, Mr. Thomas. What do you need?" "Actually, it's not exactly sewing work I'm after. I want to know if you remember me." Beatrice looked more closely at the man's face. There was something familiar about him, but she couldn't quite place it. "I'm sorry, but I can't seem to remember where we met. It's been a long time, more than 50 years. You used to work at a sewing workshop downtown. I worked at a print shop on the street behind it." Suddenly, Beatrice's memory was awakened. Thomas Edward, Tom Ed as he was known back then, the kind young man who always greeted her when she went out for lunch. Tom Ed. My goodness, is it really you? "Yes, it's me, Beatrice, after so many years." "How did you find me?" "By pure chance, actually. I've lived around here for a few years, and the other day I overheard some women talking about a very good seamstress named Beatrice Henderson. I thought it might be you." Thomas Edward explained that he had been married for 40 years, had recently become a widower, and was trying to reorganize his life. When he found out he might have found Beatrice, He was curious to know how her life had turned out. "And you, Thomas? How was your life all these years?" "Good overall. I got married, had 2 children, worked at the print shop until I retired. My wife passed away a year ago, and since then I've been a bit lost." "I'm sorry for your loss." "Thank you. And you? I know you were married because one of the women mentioned you were a widow." Beatrice told Thomas a summary of her life: her marriage to Silas, her children, her widowhood, losing the house, her experience at the assisted living facility, life at the salvage yard, and finally, her current situation. "Wow, Beatrice, you've been through a lot." "I have, but I got where I wanted to be." "Which is where exactly?" "A place where I can be myself, where I can make my own decisions and live according to what I believe is right." Thomas Edward stayed for over an hour, reminiscing about stories from when they were young and worked downtown. "Beatrice, can I ask you something? Would you like to get coffee sometime to keep talking?" Beatrice felt a warmth in her chest that she hadn't felt in a long time. "I'd like that, Thomas Edward. How about tomorrow afternoon?" "Tomorrow sounds great." Their meeting the next day was very pleasant. Thomas Edward took her to a traditional bakery in the neighborhood, where they talked about the years that had passed and the plans they had for the future. "Beatrice, can I confess something? When we were young, I always wanted to ask you out, but I was too shy, and you always seemed so determined, so focused on your work." "I was, wasn't I? Back then, I only thought about saving money to help my family. I didn't have room in my head for a boyfriend." "And now?" "Now I've learned that life is too short not to seize the opportunities to be happy." From that day on, Thomas Edward became a constant presence in Beatrice's life. He would show up regularly to help her with work, accompanied her on visits to Bridget's family, and little by little built a solid friendship with her. "Beatrice, I don't want to get in the way of your independence," he said one afternoon. "I know you fought hard to earn your freedom, but I want you to know that I really enjoy your company." "I enjoy your company too, Thomas Edward. And you're not getting in the way of anything, you're adding to it." "Adding how?" "By helping me understand that independence isn't the same thing as loneliness, that we can choose to share our life with someone without losing the right to be who we are." It was an important lesson that had taken Beatrice a long time to learn. During the difficult months after losing Silas, she had confused independence with isolation. Now she understood that it was possible to keep her autonomy and still have companionship and affection. Thomas Edward never pushed for the relationship to go beyond friendship, but gradually it became clear that there was something deeper between them. "Beatrice, I'd like to make a request," he said one afternoon in December, almost a year after their first meeting. "What request, Thomas Edward?" "I want to ask you to be my girlfriend, officially, the way I should have done 50 years ago." Beatrice laughed. "Thomas Edward, we're both over 70. Don't you think we're too old for romance?" "I think we're too old to waste time pretending we don't like each other." It was a hard argument to refute. "All right, I accept your proposal." The news of their relationship was met with joy by family and friends. Chloe was especially excited. "Grandma, how romantic! You found a love from your youth." Bridget at first was a little worried. "Mom, are you sure you really know this man? We don't want anyone taking advantage of you." "Bridget, I'm 73 years old. If I haven't learned to judge people's character by now, I never will." "I'm sorry, Mom. It's just that we worry." "I know, sweetheart, but rest easy. But rest. Thomas Edward is a good person, and I'm happy." And she truly was. For the first time since Silas's death, Beatrice felt completely fulfilled. She had work, family, friends, independence, and now she also had love. Her relationship with Thomas Edward brought a new dimension to her life. They traveled together to nearby cities on weekends, cooked together, watched old movies on TV, and talked about everything. "Beatrice, have you ever thought about getting married again?" he asked after 6 months of dating. "I have thought about it, and you?" "I've thought about it too. I think it would be good for both of us. But with one condition, Thomas Edward." "What condition?" "We each keep our own home. I don't want to abandon my work and my independence, and you shouldn't abandon your life because of me. You want us to get married but live in separate homes. I want us to get married and live wherever we want, whenever we want. Some days at my house, some days at yours, some days apart. No obligations, no control. It was an unconventional arrangement, but Thomas Edward liked the idea. Beatrice, you've always been ahead of your time. I accept your conditions. The wedding was simple, held at a registry office with only close family and dearest friends present. Beatrice wore a dress she had sewn herself, light blue, discreet but elegant. You got married in the most beautiful dress I've ever seen, said Pearl, and most importantly made by your own hands. The party was at Bridget's house, with a simple but affectionate lunch. Chloe gave an emotional speech about her grandmother. Grandma, you taught me that it's never too late to start over. That age is just a number, and what really matters is having the courage to live the way you believe is right. At the end of the day, Beatrice and Thomas Edward each went back to their own homes as they had agreed. But now they were husband and wife, and they had a whole new life ahead of them. 2 years after the wedding, Beatrice had become a small local celebrity. Her story of overcoming hardship had spread throughout the neighborhood, and many people sought her out not only for sewing services, but also for advice on how to face life's difficulties. Mrs. Beatrice, how did you find the courage to start over at 70? Asked a woman in her early 50s who had recently lost her job. Dear, courage isn't not being afraid. Courage is being afraid and still doing what needs to be done. But weren't you afraid it would go wrong? I was, but I was more afraid of giving up on myself than I was of trying. These conversations became so frequent that Pearl suggested Beatrice create an informal support group for people going through similar difficulties. Beatrice, you have so much experience and wisdom to share, and there are plenty of people out there who need guidance. The group idea worked. Every Saturday morning in the back room of Vanessa's salon, Beatrice would welcome a group of women of various ages who were facing difficult transitions in life. Some were widows, others were leaving abusive relationships, others had lost their jobs or were dealing with problems with their adult children. What I've learned in life, Beatrice would tell the group, is that no one can live our lives for us. People can share their opinions, give advice, even try to force us to do what they think is right. But at the end of the day, we're the ones who have to live with the consequences of our choices. But how do we know if we're making the right choice? Asked one of the participants. We never know for sure, dear. But we can know if we're making our own choice or a choice someone else made for us. And when we make our own choices, even if they go wrong, at least we can learn from them. The group grew quickly, and soon Beatrice was receiving invitations to speak in other places. Churches, community centers, even senior groups in other cities began inviting her to tell her story. Thomas Edward, I never imagined I'd become a speaker at 75, she said, laughing. Beatrice, you've always had a gift for helping people. You were just waiting for the right opportunity to come along. Beatrice's life had been completely transformed since that day when the young people laughed at her for receiving the keys to an old Econoline as a joke. What they had thought would be a humiliation had become the starting point for the best phase of her life. One afternoon, she was organizing some sewing work when she found the rusty key she had received that day at the salvage yard. The key was useless now, but she had kept it as a keepsake. Looking at the key, Beatrice remembered the young men who had laughed so hard at her situation. She wondered where they were now, whether they still thought they had played a funny joke on a helpless old lady. In truth, she hoped they had learned something too. She hoped they had discovered that things aren't always what they seem, and that you should never underestimate a person's ability to turn their life around. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, go ahead and leave a like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps those of us who are just starting out. Now, continuing. Beatrice put the key back in the drawer. She no longer needed it to open doors. She had learned that the most important doors in life open with determination, courage, and a little faith in yourself. That night, during dinner with Thomas Edward, she mentioned finding the key. Thomas Edward, you know what I find funniest about this whole story? What, dear? Those boys thought they were playing a joke on me, but actually they gave me the greatest gift of my life. What do you mean? They gave me the chance to prove to myself that I still had a lot of living to do. If they hadn't shown up with that key, maybe I would have stayed in that nursing home forever, thinking my life was over. Thomas Edward smiled. Beatrice, you turned a cruel joke into a life lesson. That says a lot about who you are. It says I'm stubborn, she laughed. It says you're a fighter. A few months later, Beatrice received an unexpected visit. It was one of the young men who had taken part in the joke years before. He was more mature now, more serious, and seemed embarrassed. "Ma'am, do you remember me?" he asked hesitantly. Beatrice looked at him carefully. She recognized his face, though he was older. "Yes, I do. You were one of the boys who gave me the key to the Econoline." "That's right, my name is Trevor. I came here to apologize." Apologize for what, son?" "For what we did that day. It was cruel, it was disrespectful. We were laughing at your situation, and that wasn't right." Beatrice gestured for him to sit in one of the chairs she kept in front of her workplace. "Trevor, what you did really hurt me at the time, but today I'm grateful it happened." "What do you mean?" "That Econoline you thought was a joke became the start of a new life for me. If you hadn't shown up, I probably would have stayed in a nursing home forever, feeling useless." Trevor was silent for a moment, processing what she had said. "Ma'am, are you serious? You're not angry with us?" "No, I'm not angry. You were very young. You probably didn't think about the consequences of what you were doing. We really didn't think. We just saw a situation we found funny and decided to laugh at it. And now, what brought you here?" Trevor explained that he had recently gotten married, and his wife was pregnant with their first child. While talking with her about responsibility and about how to raise a child to be a good person, he remembered the incident with Beatrice. "My wife said I should come here and apologize, that I couldn't become a father without resolving this thing that was weighing on my conscience. Your wife is a wise woman." "She is. And she wants to meet you too, if you'll allow it." "Of course I will. It'll be a pleasure to meet her." Trevor's wife, Natalie, showed up the following week. She was a friendly young woman, about 25 years old, who worked as a teacher at a public school. "Mrs. Beatrice, when Trevor told me your story, I was really impressed," she said. "You're an inspiration." "An inspiration for what, dear?" "For your ability to turn a bad situation into something good, to not let others define who you are." Natalie explained that she worked with many children from broken families, and that Beatrice's story had given her ideas on how to help them. "The children at my school go through a lot of hard things. Violence at home, parents who abandon them, situations of poverty. I'd like to invite you to come talk to them one day." "Talk about what?" "About how we can choose not to be victims of our circumstances. How we can fight to build the life we want, even when everything seems to be against us." Beatrice accepted the invitation. The visit to the school was a very moving experience. The children, initially shy, soon became interested in the story of the woman who had turned a piece of junk into a home. "Ma'am, did you really live in an old van?" asked a girl about 8 years old. "Yes, I did, dear." "And weren't you scared?" "I was. But then I thought, is it better to be scared and try or scared and give up? It's better to be scared and try." "That's right. And do you know why?" "Why?" "Because when we try and it works out, we're happy. And when we try and it doesn't work out, we learn. But when we don't even try, we don't get to be happy and we don't learn anything." The children asked many questions, and Beatrice realized that her story really could be useful to them. Many came from difficult situations, but they still had dreams and hopes. "Ma'am, when I grow up, I want to have a beautiful house for my mum," said a boy about 10 years old. "And you will, sweetheart. But remember, the most beautiful house in the world is the one where we're happy. It doesn't matter if it's big or small, new or old." From that first visit on, Beatrice began to be regularly invited to speak at schools, always with the same message, that it's possible to build a good life even when circumstances are difficult. Her story also began to draw attention beyond the region where she lived. A journalist from a local newspaper wrote an article about her that was read by many people. Mrs. Beatrice Henderson, 75, proves it's never too late to start over. Read the headline. The article told her whole journey, from losing her home to building her new life. The newspaper received many calls from readers who wanted to meet Beatrice or share similar stories. "Beatrice, looks like you've become famous," Thomas Edward joked. "Not famous, dear. I just found a way to turn my experience into something useful for other people." One of the calls the newspaper received was from a producer of a local television program. They wanted to invite Beatrice to give an interview telling her story. "Mrs. Beatrice, this would be an opportunity to share your message with many people," said the producer. "The show reaches the entire metropolitan area." Beatrice hesitated. She had never been on television, and she didn't know if she could speak well in front of the cameras. "Can I think about it?" "Of course, but you don't need to worry. It would be a relaxed, informal interview. You just need to tell your story the way you always do." After talking with Thomas Edward, Bridget and her friends, Beatrice decided to accept the invitation. The interview was recorded on a Thursday morning, right there at the place where she worked. "Mrs. Beatrice, can you tell us how this journey began?" asked the host. Beatrice told the whole story, from the assisted living facility to her current situation. She talked about the fears she had, the difficulties she faced, and especially about the importance of not giving up on your own dreams. "What was the hardest moment of this whole journey?" the host asked. "The hardest moment was when I was in the nursing home, thinking my life was over. Not because the place was bad, but because I had lost the right to choose how I wanted to live. And the happiest moment? Oh, there were several. When I got the sewing machine to work, when I received my first money from sewing, when my daughter apologized to me, when I met my husband again. Every little victory was a happy moment." What advice would you give to people going through similar struggles? That they should never accept other people defining what they can or cannot do. Age is just a number. Your financial situation is just a circumstance. What truly matters is having the courage to fight for your own dreams. The show aired a week later, and the response was much bigger than Beatrice expected. Her phone didn't stop ringing for days, with calls from people wanting to learn more about her story or ask for advice. "Mrs. Beatrice, I lost my job at 50 and thought I'd never find work again. But after seeing your interview, I decided to open a small business of my own," said one of the people who called. "And did it work out?" "It's still just starting, but I'm already selling cakes and sweets to the neighbors. It's not much, but it's mine." Those calls became so frequent that Beatrice started setting aside a few hours each week specifically to talk to people who wanted to discuss their problems. "Thomas Edward, it seems I've become a counselor," she said, laughing. "You've always been a counselor, dear. Now you're just making it official." A year after the television interview, Beatrice received an invitation that surprised her very much. A publishing house wanted to release a book telling her story. "Mrs. Beatrice, we believe your story can inspire many people in similar situations," said the editor. "The book would be written by a professional journalist, but based entirely on your words and experiences." "A book about my life?" "That's right. A book about overcoming adversity, about new beginnings, about the importance of never giving up on your own dreams." The idea of the book excited her, but also made her a bit apprehensive. What if no one wants to read about the life of an old seamstress? "Mrs. Beatrice, your story isn't about being a seamstress or being old. It's about being human. It's about facing hardships and finding the strength to overcome them." That appeals to people of all ages. The process of writing the book took 6 months. The journalist recorded hours of interviews with Beatrice, talked with her family, her friends, and the people who had been part of her journey. "Mrs. Beatrice, one of the things that impresses me most about your story is how you always found good people along the way," said the journalist during one of the interviews. "Caleb at the nursing home, Frank at the salvage yard, Wallace at the workshop, Pearl in the neighborhood, Vanessa at the salon." "That's true. Someone always showed up at just the right time." "Do you think it was luck?" "I think it was a little bit of luck, but also a little bit of being open to receiving help. A lot of good people want to help, but we aren't always willing to accept it." "What do you mean?" "Sometimes we're so focused on our own problems that we can't see the opportunities that come along. or else we have such wounded pride that we won't accept when someone offers help. When the book was finished, it was titled, It's Never Too Late to Start Over, The Story of Mrs. Beatrice. The first printing of 3,000 copies sold out in 2 weeks. "Beatrice, you've become an author," Chloe joked on the day of the book launch. "I haven't become an author, dear. I only shared my experience. But the result is the same, Grandma. You're helping a lot of people through your words." The book's success brought even more speaking invitations. Beatrice began to be invited to speak at universities, companies, senior groups in other cities, and even in other states. "Thomas Edward, I never imagined I'd travel so much at 76 years old," she said after returning from a talk in Atlanta. "You're fulfilling a mission, dear. You're proving to the world that age is no limit for anything." But not everything in Beatrice's life was fame and recognition. She kept her routine as a seamstress, kept living in the same simple house, kept being the same person as always. "The difference," she explained to Vanessa, "is that now I know my story can be useful to other people. That gives me a sense of purpose I didn't have before." "And don't you feel overwhelmed with so many invitations, so many requests?" "Sometimes I do. But then I remember that not everyone has the opportunity to turn their struggles into something that helps other people. It's a privilege, actually." One afternoon, while she was embroidering a quilt for a client, Beatrice paused to reflect on the unbelievable journey her life had become. 3 years earlier, she was just an old lady others considered a burden. Now she was the author of a book, a recognized speaker, and a role model for people facing similar difficulties. But the most important thing wasn't the fame or the recognition. The most important thing was that she had managed to prove to herself that it's never too late to start over, that age is no obstacle to achievement, and that every person has the right to choose how they want to live their life. Looking out the window, she saw Thomas Edward arriving for lunch as he did every day. She saw Buster running to greet him, as he always did. She saw her sewing machine working perfectly, her organized shelves, her works in progress. It was a simple life, but it was the life she had chosen, and that made all the difference. The phone rang, interrupting her thoughts. It was another speaking invitation, this time at a university in New York City. "Mrs. Beatrice, we'd like you to speak to our psychology students about resilience and new beginnings in old age." "With pleasure," she replied. "When would it be?" After scheduling the date and hanging up the phone, Beatrice went back to her embroidery. There was still a lot of work to do, many people to help, many stories to tell. But all of it started with a cruel joke and a rusty key. Who could have imagined that something that seemed so negative would become the beginning of the best phase of her life? Life, she thought, really is full of surprises, and the best surprises sometimes come disguised as the hardest moments. That night, during dinner with Thomas Edward, she mentioned the reflection she'd had. "Thomas Edward, do you know what I discovered today?" "What, dear?" "That gratitude isn't just being thankful for the good things that happen to us. It's also being thankful for the bad things that force us to discover strengths we didn't know we had. You're grateful for having gone through all of that. I'm grateful for having discovered who I really am, and that only happened because I was forced to fight for myself." Thomas Edward reached for her hand across the table. "Beatrice, you're the strongest person I know." "I'm not stronger than anyone, dear. I just learned that everyone has strength. The difference is who decides to use that strength and who prefers to pretend they don't have it." It was a lesson Beatrice had learned the hard way possible. But it was also the most valuable lesson of her life, that within every person there is a strength capable of overcoming any difficulty. You just have to have the courage to find it and use it. And in her case, it had all started with an old Econoline, a rusty key, and the decision to turn a humiliation into an opportunity. Who could imagine that those laughing young people, thinking they were playing a cruel joke on a defenseless old lady, were actually handing her the keys to freedom? Life definitely has more imagination than any fiction. End of story. Now tell me what you thought of this story of overcoming and where you're following us. If you have something to share with us, leave it in the comments with sincere words. Do you believe Mrs. Beatrice made the right decisions along the journey? We'd love to read your opinion. Thank you very much for your company. Don't forget to leave your like and, most importantly, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other moving stories.